Well, welcome to number 4 in our entrepreneurial series of lectures. This is the progress of process. I'm a fan of process, really, and you'll probably hear me rabbiting on about that subject lots and lots of times. So today what we're going to look at is how to progress that process. Process is so important and lots of people miss it. Let's just check on the journey so far. There you can see it. That's where we've been and where we're going. Well, it's not quite where we've been. Here we are. This is where we've been and this is where we're going today. Do you know something? Everything big starts little. Think about that, what do they say? Out of a big oak tree, a little acorn comes from the little acorn. Everything big starts small. So the process of fulfilling a big vision requires us to start with something small. And lots of times people don't want to do that. I had a friend a long time ago, and he came to me with this fantastic business plan. He was from Ghana, and he wanted to build the largest rabbit farm that you could ever think of. That was because in his country, rabbit is a staple diet. Not fond of it myself, but anyway, he wanted to build this rabbit farm. And his vision was for a huge rabbit farm that would feed lots and lots of people. And I guess it would probably have made him very rich as well. That's what he wanted to do. I looked at the business plan and I said, congratulations, you're a genius. I looked right the way through it. I thought, this is absolutely fantastic. This can work. It really should work. I said, okay, what you need to do is off you go and get yourself a couple of rabbits and a cage and the feed, and you're on your journey. He didn't want to do that. In fact, he was absolutely anti doing that. I said, what do you want to do? He said, I want to start with the farm, a big farm. And he said, to do that, I need a couple of £1 million. I listened to the story, and sadly, he wouldn't listen to my progress of process, start small, move on, get bigger, and he just didn't want to know. In fact, tragically, he said, no, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pack up my job. He had a good job, actually. And he said, I'm going to stay at home and pray till I have £2 million. I said, I don't think that's a good idea. I was a bit suspicious about him staying at home as well and praying. I think he watched television, but there you go. That's me being a bit cynical. But and I really like the guy. But sadly, he didn't understand process. He didn't want to do process. He wanted to start big. Actually, when you think about some of the big names in the high street, Marks and Spencer's, Tesco's, they really started so small, all of them. I think Tesco's was a barrow in a market. Marks and Spencer's, tiny little place. Lots and lots of these big companies that we think of. Alan Sugar, I've taken the time to read his life story. He started by selling bricks out of an old pram, not bricks, wooden bricks, to start fires with. Chop them all up, put them in bundles, and that's how he started to make his money. And you look at him now and you think, oh, isn't that amazing? Look, he's so rich he can do anything. Isn't that wonderful? But in fact, all of these people started very, very small. The tragic news was that this friend of mine, because he wouldn't listen to the process, he ended up really spoiling his family and himself, and eventually, sadly, he died without fulfilling his dream, without fulfilling his vision. And it wasn't that it couldn't be done. He wanted to start big. He did not want to activate process. And oftentimes people do not want to do that. Process is the ability to see where you're going, but to understand that you have to take steps to get there and you have to build the plan. And remember what I've often said, and I'll say it again, every long journey starts with the first step. And even Steve, what's his name? He said that he was convinced that most people fail to succeed as entrepreneurs because they give up in the early stages when it gets tough. If you've got a vision and you've got a plan, it has to be processed, but you have to understand there's going to be times when you want to give up because you think, I'm not going to get there. Get there. Henry Ford, Ford Motor Company, he used to say, there's always somebody comes along and says it's impossible, and then he says all the negatives pile in, and you have a whole song full of people shouting, it's impossible, it's impossible. Actually, you have to process things. Our culture, unfortunately, mitigates against processing things. We want, in today's world, everything right now. So think about it. We have instant tea, instant coffee, takeaway. We want it straight away. We don't want to wait for it. Microwave it, make it quick, have it now. Don't want to wait. The credit card will solve the problems. And so reality in our culture says you can have everything and you can have it now. But actually, in reality, real good things, if you want to build something big and good and useful for the community at large, it will take time, it takes process. You have to move from the small to the big. It's always like that. Somebody somewhere is doing it. Somebody's making that instant coffee that you can stick in your hot water and do it. So, process. If you've got a vision and a dream and you want to be an entrepreneur, then make it your baby. Feed it. Nurse it. Play with it. Talk about it. Love it. Dream about it. Be happy when it keeps you awake at night. Oh, dear me. I don't want to be kept awake at night. Well, some of these things, when you've really got something on your mind, keeps you awake at night. Have all those things and you'll be the person that is processing things. So let's look at what is process. First of all, in the process that we need to decide those plans, 1, 2, 3. There's more than 3, but let's start with 3. Where do I want to go? What's the first things that I need to do? What is the plan? How long will it take? And then we need to set specific goals. Now you'll find in almost every business plan that in fact, it sometimes becomes boring, but you'll find in almost every business plan, they have what's called a SMART plan. SMART. So here we go. SMART plan. Set specific goals. What am I trying to do? Make sure that those goals are clear and well defined. What is it that you're trying to get to? Set measurable. SM. Measurable goals. If you can't measure it, well, how far have you got? What was you trying to do? People sometimes live in a fog. They've got ideas and visions, but you need to clarify those things and process them. Set, here's the A, attainable goals. You're not going to get 1 million in the first day. It's unrealistic. What is it I can attain? My friend could have got 2 rabbits. Rabbits breed very fast. It wouldn't have been long, but he had to start small and he didn't want to. Set relevant goals. Sometimes you listen to people and they want to do something, but they're going off at a tangent. There's something else over there that has nothing to do with where they want to get to. So we have to concisely bring them in. What can I really achieve? And set them time bound. I want to achieve this by then. I want to get to there within 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years. When I was in college, we had a lecturer. He was the head of Coverdale Press, and he was the guy that first introduced to the United Kingdom the Living Bible, and the Coverdale Press produced that. And I remember him lecturing us at college and saying, the first thing you need to do when you leave here is set goals and work out a plan for 1 year or 2 years or 5 years or something like that. I'll let you into a secret. I've still got my 5-year plans on my shelf, and I reviewed them every year, and I've been doing it for, I don't know, 50 years. And they're still there. And it's really exciting when you set goals like that and you tick them off and you go, aha. I don't know about you, but I'm a bit of a list maker. And there's something very satisfying when you've got a work schedule and you've got that list in front of you and you tick them off. It's done. Or you cross it off. It gives you a sense of satisfaction. So we need time-bound goals. What am I going to do? When am I going to achieve it? Where do I want to get to? What's the first things I need to do? What is the plan? How long will it take? Then we need to create a plan that is itemized. You know, one of the things I've often noticed when I've been in the United States is how clever they are at stating the obvious. What I really mean by that is sometimes I remember doing a course for an American plan and I thought, oh dear me, they even tell you where to stick the postage stamp. There is a sense in which, and I've often said this, that Americans are really good at taking things and itemizing it. The British, on the other hand, we have got the big plan and we want everybody to jump, and we assume lots of people know all sorts of things in the middle, and sometimes they just don't know the middle things. And that's a real problem. Whereas Americans assume you don't know anything at all, you're stupid. And sometimes that's very helpful because you do actually have everything itemized. First I do this, then I do that, and then I do the other. What's the plan? How long will it take? Create a plan. Chronologically, put things in order. Where am I going? What's the plan and where does it go? And and what is it that doesn't take money these days? If it's going to be a plan and you're going to talk to the banks or money people or business people, you need what's horribly called a cash flow. I often say to people, because we run a company, cash flow is the king. If the money isn't there, even if it's promised you and it isn't there and somebody's shouting at you to pay the bill, you're in trouble. Cash flow is king. Is what you're planning achievable? Now, be careful on that one, because there are lots of negative, I call them bucket of water people, who will tell you that what you want to do is not achievable. It probably is. It needs your vision and your entrepreneur spirit to make sure that it is, but it probably is achievable, and most things aren't as impossible as people think that they are. They really can be done. I think you need to also get to know what your skills are and what other people's skills are, because very often most times you can't do things by yourself. We're not an expert in everything, are we? Make sure your plan is explainable to other people. One of the biggest difficult things is to communicate to others. And, you know, you can see that in life in so many ways, that sometimes you can see something, but it's persuading other people to see it as well, because most things can only be done in team. Financiers and bank managers always want to see all the details. Put it on paper or in a computer. Get to know how to use a cash flow, how to use one of those things, a spreadsheet, so that you can actually do it. Not only making that smart list, but ask yourself, are there any legal requirements that demand your compliance in order to fulfill your vision? Business licenses, equal opportunities laws, oh dear, so it goes on. Workers' compensation. Know what sort of taxes you have to pay. You know what they say, there's always two things that are certain in life, death and taxes. Advertising and marketing. all of those things have all sorts of ramifications and legal things around them. Sales tax, international laws, if you're going to be really big in international, data security, that's a real problem in today's world. Insurance, work premises, health and safety, intellectual property, and so it goes on. Check all those things if you're going to, and do them in the early stages so that you're thinking about them. Otherwise, you end up with problems. As I said already, there's a process cycle that goes on and on and on. And I've also already said that there's let yourself down if you think it's all going to be smooth and plain sailing. It jolly well isn't. There will be all sorts of ups and downs and disappointments and betrayals, and people would say bad things about you, and sometimes they'll be true and most of the times they won't be. And sometimes it's just plain jealousy, especially if you're getting towards that vision that some people said couldn't possibly be done. But I also think that we should be ready for the thrill of achievement. My friend Gerald Coates always used to say, we need to rejoice and celebrate every small success. I used to laugh at my wife because, like most people, or like lots of people, there's the mortgage to pay. And she used to tell me every month that every time she paid the mortgage, she'd go somewhere and celebrate, even if it was just a cup of coffee and a little sandwich, just to say, I succeeded. I paid it this month yet again, because it's so hard sometimes. Some cases, you'll be going where the experts said you couldn't go. I remember talking to my mother when I was a little child and asking her, will we go to the moon one day? She said, we will never, ever land anything on the moon. Just shows, doesn't it? Sometimes you'll even get praised by those who said, ooh, you can't do that. And sometimes you'll find that people respect you who you didn't even know because you have been where other people haven't been. I want to tell you a little story from the Bible. I call it the Babel principle. It was a big project, and you can read it in the Bible. It's in Genesis, and God has something to say about it. I've always been fascinated by this story, and I think people sometimes miss it. It really was a success story, but it was a success story in a funny kind of way. First of all, they had a plan. That's what we've been talking about today, isn't it? Have a plan. Where am I going? First steps. Then, secondly, and this is what the Bible actually says about the Babel principle. Secondly, all the people were in agreement that the plan should be accomplished. Do you know something? It's really difficult to get people in agreement. And when people are in agreement, it's easier to make a plan come to fruition. I've often said poor old Moses knew that they could possess the land that he wanted to possess, but he never did. You know why he never did? Because he couldn't persuade other people to come with him. That's always a problem. I've experienced in my life when I could see where it could go, and we didn't get there because I failed to persuade other people to come with me. So the third thing in the Babel principle is good communication. How well do I communicate what I see and what I understand and what I can persuade others to come with me for? And the really interesting thing I find about this story is what God had to say about it all. God says, he looks down at what the plan was, and he looks at the people and he says they've got good communication, they've got a plan, they are in agreement, and God says, this amazes me, God says, nothing will be impossible to these people if we don't interfere. Isn't that an amazing statement from God about human plans? We can achieve it. We can do it. We can do it if we have a good plan, agreement with others, good communication, and you find that it comes to fruition. Never forget that your progress and process sometimes will go wrong. And next time we talk together, I want to talk about something that people don't like to talk about, and that is the ability to deal with failure. How do we do that and still be a successful entrepreneur? How do we deal with failure? Hope you've enjoyed my process. It's something that I keep coming back to. We need process. I'll see you next time.